I read my brother's message for the third time and still couldn't believe it. About Mom's 60th birthday dinner next week. Olivia and I think you should sit this one out. Her parents are flying in from Ottawa. They're quite formal. You understand. I placed my phone down on the desk in my office at the Royal Ontario Museum. The late afternoon Toronto sunlight reflected off the glass outside, bright, almost blinding. You understand? Yeah, I understand very well. For 6 years now, in Marcus's eyes, I've only been the younger sister who works at a museum. Vague, ordinary, not high level enough to stand beside him and his successful lawyer girlfriend. Not a PhD in anthropology, not the author of 3 books, not a woman just nominated for a national award. Just the sister who works at a museum. And this time, he didn't even want me there, at my own mother's birthday. I know exactly what you understand really means. It means in his world, I've always been extra. For 6 years since I graduated, he has never once asked what I actually do at the museum. When I was appointed the youngest chief curator in the 117-year history of the ROM, he sent me one message: cool. When I received a national award for my book on Inuit cultural preservation, he was out playing golf and forgot to even say congratulations. Every milestone in my life, he stayed outside, not because he didn't know, but because he didn't want to know. And now he's excluding me from our mother's birthday just because he thinks I don't fit with his girlfriend's family. I stared at the message. My chest tightened, not because I was rejected from a dinner, but because of one question that kept repeating in my mind. Who am I, really, in his eyes? And if the truth about me stood right in front of him, how would he react? The problem was never just a dinner. The problem was the way Marcus has seen me for the past 6 years. To him, success has always been numbers. How many floors in a condo, how many deals signed, how much money in the account. But my work, research, writing books, working with Indigenous communities, testifying before councils, to him, it's just something that sounds nice, not real enough to show off. And now I finally understand. Marcus doesn't really look down on me. He's afraid that if he admits I'm successful in a different way, he'll have to face the fact that he's no longer the only one who made it in the family after our father left. So he chose something easier. He made me smaller, turned me into the sister who works somewhere behind a museum. And this time, he went even further. He erased me from our own mother's birthday just to protect the image he built in front of his girlfriend. This is no longer a misunderstanding. This is a choice to put ego above family. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who couldn't handle your light, type 1 below. Not because you're weak, but because you finally see the truth. After reading Marcus's message, I almost called him right away. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I am not who he thinks I am. I wanted to list everything, every title, every project, every time I stood in front of hundreds of people, speaking about culture and history. But then, I stopped. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was tired. There's something very strange about being underestimated for too long. At first, you react, you explain, you try to prove yourself, you send links, you share your work, you talk about your wins. But if the other person never really wants to listen, every word just disappears into empty space. Slowly, you learn to stay quiet. Not because you agree, but because you understand your value cannot be forced into someone's ears when they choose to look away. And I realized I was already at that point with Marcus. A part of me still hurt reading, "You understand." But another part of me went cold, calm in a way that surprised even myself. I no longer wanted to prove I was good enough to sit at his table. If he needs to believe I'm just an ordinary sister so he can feel taller, then fine. The truth is, what hurt me most was not the disrespect. It was the indifference. 6 years. 6 years without a single real question. Not once did he ask what I was working on. Not once did he ask if I was happy or tired. He created a smaller version of me in his mind and chose to live with that instead of the real person standing right in front of him. I remember the day I became the youngest chief curator in the museum's history. I called him, my voice shaking with excitement. He said, "Oh, nice. So you manage some small exhibits now?" I laughed it off, but after the call, I sat alone in my new office, looking at my name on the door, and felt like my joy had just been touched by something cold. Maybe Marcus never realized what he was doing. Because jealousy rarely looks like jealousy. It hides behind logic. I'm just being realistic. Your work is academic. Real life isn't like books. Those sentences sound harmless, but repeated long enough, they make you question your own worth. At that afternoon, sitting in my office, looking down at the exhibition I spent 3 years building, I understood something clearly. I no longer needed permission to be seen. I didn't need him to confirm my success. I didn't need to show up just to prove I belong. There's a quiet kind of growth that happens when you accept this. Not everyone in your family is capable of seeing you. And that doesn't make you smaller. It only shows their limits. I put my phone down, took a deep breath. If Marcus wasn't curious about me for 6 years, then I no longer owe him an explanation in one afternoon driven by pride. I will keep doing my work, keep preparing for my meetings with ministers, keep building the projects I believe in. Because sometimes, the strongest response is not to argue, but to stand still and let the truth walk into the room on its own time. I didn't expect things to turn in such a strange way. The next afternoon, I was reviewing my presentation for a meeting with the federal delegation when Robert, our director of external affairs, walked into my office in a hurry. The tour had been moved to Thursday, 3 p.m. Alongside the Minister of Heritage, there would also be a newly appointed parliamentary secretary for arts and culture. I opened my laptop and asked her name out of habit, and when Robert said Olivia Rosen, my hand froze on the mouse. I know exactly one Olivia Rosen, Marcus's girlfriend, the lawyer he always talks about with pride, the one with very formal parents flying in from Ottawa. I asked for her profile. Her photo appeared on the screen. Dark hair, confident eyes, the smile of someone used to success. McGill graduate, Osgoode Hall law degree, formerly at a major law firm, now working in policy advising. And in 2 days, she would walk into the very place I oversee. I leaned back in my chair and let out a quiet laugh. Marcus thinks I'm not high level enough to sit at the same table as her family. And yet, in just 2 days, she will walk into this building and be introduced to me by my full title, Dr. Natalie Westwood, Chief Curator, the person directly proposing collaboration with her office. I could have texted Marcus right then. I could have said, "By the way, your girlfriend is coming to work with me." But I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I no longer felt the need to fix the misunderstandings he chose to create. If in 6 years he never asked what I do, then this is not my responsibility either. Thursday morning, I chose a fitted navy suit, simple gold jewelry, my hair tied in a neat low bun, not to impress, but to reflect exactly where I stand. I walked through the familiar halls, past exhibitions I spent 3 years building, Inuit garments displayed after months of community consultation, multi-million-dollar partnerships secured through careful work. At 2:58 p.m., security called. The delegation had arrived. I stepped into the grand hall with steady steps. The minister was speaking with her team, and beside her stood Olivia. She turned as the introduction began. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Natalie Westwood, Chief Curator." Olivia smiled, shook my hand, her expression professional, with not a single sign of recognition. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. Marcus never told her who I really am, or if he did, he told a much smaller version of me. And me? I didn't react. I simply smiled back. And the tour began.
The tour lasted almost an hour and a half. I guided them through each exhibition space, explaining our consultations with 14 Arctic indigenous communities, the repatriation of artifacts, and how we don't just display objects, we create ongoing cultural dialogue. Olivia asked sharp questions about intellectual property, budget allocation, legal frameworks for cross-regional work. I looked at her and understood why Marcus admired her. She was smart, confident, and truly cared about her field. At the center of the exhibition, where traditional Inuit garments stood beside contemporary design, Olivia paused. She said she had read my book while preparing for her new role. She said it should be required reading for anyone in cultural policy. In that moment, something warmed inside my chest, not because of praise, but because I was finally seen for who I am. After the tour, we moved to my office for a deeper discussion. I presented the proposal, the data, the partnerships already secured. Olivia took notes, then said she wanted to bring everything to the committee next week. When the meeting ended, the minister left first. Olivia stayed a few minutes longer. She smiled and said, "This Saturday, I'm hosting a small gathering, some people from the arts and policy world. I'd really love for you to come." Saturday, 7:30 p.m., her boyfriend's condo in Yorkville. My mother's 60th birthday. I kept my expression calm. I'd be happy to attend. She took out her phone, asked for my number, and sent me the address. The address appeared on my screen. Marcus's condo. After they left, Priya walked in, eyes wide. I told her about the invitation. "That's the same dinner you were excluded from?" she asked. I nodded. "Are you going to tell them?" I shook my head. "No. I was invited for my work. I'll just show up." That night, I called my mother, told her I would be there. She went quiet for a moment, then laughed, unable to hide her excitement. Marcus had spent the whole week talking about his girlfriend's elegant evening, inviting important people from the arts world. He had no idea one of them was his own sister. Saturday night, I chose a simple black dress, nothing flashy. I didn't want to walk in like a statement. I just wanted to walk in as myself. The elevator opened on the 23rd floor. Laughter spilled out from inside. Marcus opened the door, mid-sentence, and froze when he saw me. "Nat, what are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said softly. "Is there a problem?" He stepped back without thinking. I walked in. The condo was bright, filled with guests holding wine glasses. Olivia came out from the kitchen, smiling warmly. She looped her arm around my arm and led me into the living room. "Let me introduce someone very special," she said. "Dr. Natalie Westwood, Chief Curator of the ROM." Then she turned to my mother. "And this is Helen Westwood, Marcus's mother." The same last name. I saw the realization slowly form on Olivia's face. She turned to me. "Westwood? I'm Natalie Westwood," I said quietly, "Marcus's sister." No one shouted. No one dropped a glass. But the entire room shifted. And Marcus stood there, pale, as the truth finally walked into the very room he once closed me out of. Marcus stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Liv, I can explain." But Olivia didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me, then slowly moved to my mother, then back to Marcus. The confusion on her face shifted into something colder. "You never told me your sister is the chief curator of the ROM." Her voice was steady, too steady. "You just said she works at a museum." Marcus forced an awkward smile. "Well, that's technically true." I spoke, not to attack, just to clarify. "I oversee the entire exhibition system and cultural programs, and I work closely with Olivia's department." Olivia's father, a judge, stepped forward and shook my hand. He mentioned a hearing I had participated in, said he had quoted my research in a recent ruling. Those words weren't meant to impress, but in the thick silence of the room, they landed like quiet blows against the image Marcus had built for years. I looked at my brother. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel smaller than him. I didn't feel his shadow over me. I just saw a man facing the consequence of his own insecurity. Olivia asked to speak with Marcus in private. The bedroom door closed behind them, leaving awkward conversations floating in the living room. My mother walked over and gently held my hand. There was no victory in her eyes, only a quiet sadness mixed with relief. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. The problem was never whether I was enough. The problem was that Marcus was never brave enough to face someone else's success, especially when that person was his own sister. And when the truth finally stood in the middle of the room, it didn't make me bigger. It simply made his illusion collapse. About 20 minutes later, Olivia stepped out of the bedroom alone. Her makeup was still perfect, but her eyes were clearly red. She asked to speak with me on the balcony. The October wind was cold, and the lights of Toronto shone below us. "I owe you an apology," she said directly. "I believed the version of you that Marcus told me. I even told my parents that you probably wouldn't feel comfortable around people like us. I was arrogant." I shook my head. "You were just reflecting what you were told." "No," Olivia said softly, cutting me off. "I'm a lawyer. I'm trained to verify information, but I didn't do that with the family of the man I love, and that says a lot." That night, no one raised their voice. But as the guests slowly left, only 4 of us remained. Me, my mother, Marcus, and Olivia. She turned to Marcus, her voice calm, almost cold. "If you can make your own sister smaller just to feel bigger, how can I trust that one day you won't do the same to me?" 3 days later, Marcus texted me and asked to meet for coffee. He said they had broken up. Not just because of that night, but because Olivia realized his insecurity was not a small issue. It was how he saw the world. Marcus sat across from me, dark circles under his eyes. "I've been jealous of you since we were kids," he admitted. "Instead of becoming better, I chose to make you smaller. The outcome wasn't my victory, it was his loss. He lost a good woman and was finally forced to face himself. And that is the real lesson." We didn't make peace right away. Forgiveness is not a single nod. It's a process. Marcus started with small things. He read my work, not just the headlines. He showed up at the opening of my new exhibition. He called to ask what I was working on and actually listened to the answer. No more half jokes, no more dismissive looks. I didn't forget the years I was made to feel smaller, but I could see the effort, and this time the effort was real. Marcus started therapy. He said he wanted to understand why other people's success, especially mine, made him feel like he was losing. We talked more about our father, about the years after he left, about the pressure of being the man of the house at just 8 years old. For the first time, I didn't speak to him as someone hurt. I spoke as an adult, and our relationship began to rebuild, one piece at a time. Slowly, but honestly. 1 year after that night, full of tension, Marcus stood in the same apartment, holding a glass, raising a toast for me. I had just received a national honor, and he said, in front of my friends and colleagues,
There was a time I saw my sister through the lens of my own insecurity. It took me 6 years to understand that success is not a competition. And the thing I regret most is not losing a relationship, but almost losing her. I stood there, looking at him, with no desire left to prove anything, because I understood something very clearly. My value was never in how others see me. It lives in the way I wake up every morning, do work I believe in, and never need permission to shine. Sometimes karma is not revenge. It's when people finally see what they almost lost. If you've ever been made to feel small, overlooked, but still kept growing quietly every day, type 1 below. Not for others, but as a reminder to yourself that you are never small.